everyone, Nicole Russo in Kentucky and Dan Illman in New York, bringing you an update as we continue to count down toward the Kentucky Oaks, now less than 100 days away. With racing beginning to resume in major jurisdictions, here's a look at the upcoming points races toward the Oaks here in the month of June. We'll see action in California, Kentucky, and New York in the coming weeks. The big prize on the immediate horizon is the Santa Anita Oaks, which we'll get to in a minute. The Acorn, a prestigious Grade 1 mile later this month on the Belmont Stakes undercard. Dan, I think that'll be an intriguing race to discuss as we get to it. In past years, we've seen some Oaks winners cutting back in distance to go after that prestigious race. This year, with the calendar placement, we could have some talented fillies using it as a prep before stretching out.
It's really going to be a test of the trainer's skills as well to get these horses ready to stretch out in distance. I think it will favor horses that lack experience right now, that are building up a foundation leading up to a race like the Kentucky Oaks. I think we'll see some lightly raced horses in the Acorn, horses with speed that would benefit from the one-turn configuration at Belmont Park and ultimately might build up that stamina and that wind for the Kentucky Oaks. That's going to be a very key prep. I agree with you.
Well, in the meantime, as we mentioned, the Santa Anita Oaks, the field to be drawn a bit later on after our shoot here, expected to be a small group for that West Coast prep, led by the invading Swiss Skydiver, winner of the Gulfstream Oaks and the Fantasy. As you'll see here, as we check in on the points leaderboard toward a spot in the 14-horse Kentucky Oaks starting gate, Swiss Skydiver leading by a wide margin. And Dan, I think the question with her will be, she's so good right now. Can she continue to maintain that form through the summer and into the fall, looking ahead at the Oaks and ultimately the Breeders' Cup coming up just a short while afterward?
You really hit the nail right on the head there, Nicole. And I think the connections did the right thing because if you recall, the original plan for Swiss Skydiver was to be sent overseas to run on the turf at the Royal Ascot meeting. I think that might have taken a little bit too much out of her. That strenuous trip, that strenuous race, it might have knocked her out for the fall. I like what they're doing now. They're running her in the Santa Anita Oaks. I would expect a little bit of a freshening after that race, especially if she is successful. And then perhaps she'll be peaking at the right time, hopefully, for the Kentucky Oaks. But as we look at this top 14 list, as we see right now, there has been a lot of attrition in this division. British Idiom, of course, the 2-year-old filly champion, is injured and sidelined. Finite had a chip just taken out of her ankle. We'll see if she'll be able to get back for the Kentucky Oaks. Donna Veloci, who's very, very talented, she was sent to the farm recently with a minor setback. I think with a little TLC, she'll be back in time for the Kentucky Oaks. But what an opportunity for horses like Swiss Skydiver, and perhaps a great opportunity for a horse like Speech, who's very lightly raced. We might see her in the Santa Anita Oaks as well.
Well, certainly, you mentioned Speech, who was second in the Santa Isabel. Gingham, also a Santa Anita Oaks possibility, was second in the Las Virgenes. A handful of others expected for the race, as we said, likely to be a small field entered when the field is drawn later on. Some who would be making their stakes debuts, including a filly I'd like to talk about a little bit in Mareneath. And Dan, this is a filly you and I have a little bit of history with. We saw her and discussed her at the 2018 Fasig-Tipton Saratoga yearling sale. She's part of American Pharoah's first crop. I was struck at that sale. I remember discussing her by how much like her sire she looks physically. Later sold for $600,000 as a 2-year-old. She knocked on the door with 2 good seconds in California maiden races before breaking through with this 10 1/4 length score at Oaklawn, now likely to step up in class. Dan, what do you think of this filly's development thus far?
I think you can look at her one of two ways. You can look at this race right now and say, this is the coming out party. This is the moment where the light bulb went on and she is on her way to perhaps fulfilling her sire's legacy and become a true stakes horse. Or you can simply say, this is not a strong field. This is a sprint race. It is obviously contested over a wet track, and things are going to be a lot different from a distance and surface standpoint and a class standpoint, obviously, in the Santa Anita Oaks. But there's no denying that was a very impressive win. She has a very impressive pedigree, and she got a very impressive 91 Beyer speed figure. The sky could be the limit for this filly. We're going to learn a lot more about her on Saturday, but you were absolutely right when we discussed her at the yearling sale. She looks and reminds me just like her dad.
Yeah, and certainly, I think distance won't be a limitation for a lot of these runners by American Pharoah. I think you hit the nail on the head, too. We have a chance to learn a lot about her as she steps up in class, really a chance to learn a lot about some of these fillies with lighter resumes who might be facing Swiss Skydiver. Going to be a tall order for one of them to upset her. That being said, it's almost definite that we'll see some new names on the points list, as there's a lot of value just for running second or third in a major prep like the Santa Anita Oaks. And we'll take a closer look at those new names on the list and recap the latest action for you next week on the Oaks Countdown.